Wokeness, a word we come across everywhere in our modern age, not just in movies and television. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, the meaning is as follows. Wokeness, a state of being aware, especially of social problems such as racism and inequality. An incredibly important thing, one might think. The only problem is that this is not the complete description of the term wokeness. An essential additional description is interestingly missing in many English language dictionaries, such as the Cambridge, Collins or Macmillan Dictionary, but can be found in the largest German dictionary, the Duden. Wokeness, it says here, is a high sensitivity to especially racist, sexist discrimination, social inequality and the like, occasionally related to narrow-minded or militant activism. And it is this additional description that turns an essentially good thing into a very dangerous one. When narrow-mindedness, and in extreme cases even militantism, are suddenly regarded as desirable qualities, because officially they happen in the name of something good and just, something is very wrong. One could argue that our society is comparatively well informed, and yet we seem to be increasingly inclined to take ever more extreme positions. And this is becoming more and more evident in major film and series productions. This video is about some examples from modern cinema productions, which were marketed as super progressive, but in the end were anything but, and rather give an almost frightening insight into the radical mindset of some filmmakers calling themselves progressive. This video is meant to show how one-sided political correctness in film and television can do more harm than good. Glad you tuned in. The Woman King is set in the West African kingdom of Dahomey in the early 19th century. A film that is meant to serve as an empowerment movie and is supposed to be based on historical events. It is the story of a special female military unit, the Izogie, which actually existed, and its fictional general, Nanisca. The story that is told is the following. The Izogie, as an all-female unit, are fighting for justice in the kingdom of Dahomey. And they are instrumental in getting the king, Geizo, to stop the slave trade. They want the king to earn his money by selling palm oil, because the Izogie themselves strive to abolish slavery. The film is basically about the struggle of the Izogie against another kingdom that works closely with white colonialists and wants to maintain the slave trade. The general Nanisca impresses the king so much that at the end of the film, he even shares a seat of power with her, making her a woman king. Quick question, isn't a woman king a queen? Not so important. It all sounds like the most progressive kingdom in Africa in the century before last, doesn't it? A kingdom against slavery, which not only emphasizes women's rights, but also crowns a woman as its second king. The Woman King, therefore, was supposed to be bringing empowering black histories to Hollywood. But what happened then? People just did a little reading up on history and, well, it turns out that the kingdom of Dahomey and even the warrior women of the Izogie in reality did not even remotely resemble the portrayal in the movie. It turns out that the kingdom was not only not at all against slave trade, but significantly involved in the slave trade of its own people. And the Izogie, the supposedly noble women soldiers, were in fact the driving force behind the capture and imprisonment of most of the slaves. In the name of their king, they destroyed villages, tore families apart, and sold their own people to the highest bidder. And their king, Geizo, who's portrayed in the film as a good, open-minded guy, was in real life one of the worst slave kings ever. Very strange indeed that there had been a call for boycott, even before the film's release in the fall of 2022, when people learned of the true, rather dark background of the movie. Especially after the film was also framed as if it was historically accurate.
And I think the reason why the Woman King is important is because it's historical and it's real.
Are you sure about that?
And when it became clear that people might not be so interested in watching a film glorifying slave traders, even if they are of a certain gender and skin color, the potential audience was immediately verbally attacked by Viola Davis, the lead actress herself.
If you don't come see it, then you're sending a message that black women cannot lead the box office globally. That you are supporting that narrative.
So if you translate it, you're a racist if you don't watch the movie because you don't want to see black women as protagonists. You thought Gladiator and 300 were good, but now you refuse to watch The Woman King? Well, but it turns out that a lot of the calls for a Woman King boycott actually came from the black community. That being said, movies like Gladiator, 300 or Braveheart have never claimed to be any kind of politically correct empowerment movie. Yes, if you take a look at the story of The Woman King without context, the film is actually quite entertaining. The story arc is pretty solid, and most of the characters are actually three-dimensional. With a few exceptions, the actors put in strong, convincing performances. And probably the call for boycott of the film could have easily been prevented if extremes had been avoided. Because in the story, there's one exclusively good side and one exclusively evil side. Good are the female soldiers, evil the white slavers, and the other male-dominated kingdom with which the slavers cooperate. There's one good white guy, by the way, but we don't have to worry about him. First, he doesn't really have a part in the story and might as well have been left out completely. Second, he's not 100% white, but had a black mother who had once been a slave. The filmmakers seem to have been so obsessed with wanting to make everything 100% politically correct that they have lost sight of the big picture. Why didn't they draw a more accurate picture of the conditions of the time and instead resorted to whitewashing everything? The true story of the Izogie would have been fascinating even if they had actually been portrayed as the slave traders they really were. And it still could have been a female empowerment film, probably a much more solid one. They could have shown the equally fictional story of a female general who leaves the Izogie because the king's demands are too brutal for her. She could have gone to battle with a handful of her female comrades against the king and the rest of her former comrades and be prepared to sacrifice her life for freedom and peace. This way, not everything would have been black and white, and the warriors would have not all been portrayed as progressive, selfless and self-sacrificing, but one thing would have been achieved. The Woman King would not have been a propaganda film. The basic idea of the film, to tell stories of the African continent, is a very good direction. But then to think that glorifying women who have committed terrible deeds is a good idea is more than strange. The audience is not allowed to form their own opinions by being told a story that could have been at least a little more truthful. And it's even stranger when the audience, fed up by Hollywood's black and white storytelling in the name of progressiveness, is then called racist. Because then the militant side of progressiveness shows itself again, and in this way, one will never achieve a more open society, but rather contribute to a greater division. This can also be seen in another film that was recently shown in cinemas. Another movie that exclusively shows extremes is Don't Worry Darling by director Olivia Wilde, which premiered in September 2022. The film is about life in a world reminiscent of the 1950s. A world where wives cook for their men and women are generally busy keeping the house nice and clean while the men are at work. A world where women don't really have a say. Everything seems peaceful and harmonious, but surprise surprise, we'll learn pretty soon that nothing is as it seems. Because the 1950s world doesn't exist physically at all, but only as kind of a metaverse for loser men who pump their women full of drugs in real life in the current time and sedate them that way. Then they put some virtual reality goggles on the women and forced them to live in their VR 1950s world, because that is supposed to be exactly the world that is perfect for men. The women in the film are practically all victims. The men in the film are a unit of dangerous loser types. Nothing in between. All the men are oppressors, all the women are the oppressed. There is no single male character who is good. I initially thought that at least Harry Styles would be spared, because he and director Olivia Wilde got a little closer during filming. But no, don't worry, he gets his comeuppance as well. Incidentally, director Olivia Wilde proudly told us that the leader of the men who forced their wives to live in the make-believe world is modeled after Jordan Peterson. In an interview, she refers to Jordan Peterson as the leader of the modern incel community, where incels are men who are involuntarily celibate and approve of misogyny. That's pretty harsh, actually. Because by this extreme statement, virtually everyone who finds Jordan Peterson's books and videos interesting is labeled a misogynist. That Olivia Wilde has not studied Jordan Peterson's books or teachings is obvious. Because Jordan Peterson may be many things, but he is not a misogynist in any way.
The first thing I would say is that I'm not anti-feminist per se. I didn't say that women shouldn't be striving for the top or anything like that, because I don't believe that for a second.
So you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine?
It's not only fine, it's eminently desirable for everyone, for individuals and for society.
Completely different from Chris Pine's leader character in the film, who is a super creep who gets a kick out of oppressing women. Jordan Peterson gives thought to a wide variety of topics and actually quotes studies a lot, rather than just basing his statements purely on emotion, as is often the case these days, especially in political discussions. The fact that he also usually considers several different perspectives on several different topics and doesn't shy away from voicing them might offend some representatives of the borderline militant Hollywood liberalism. Are all of his opinions unchallenged truth and have no need for discussion? Of course not. But in our society of extremes, it is often enough these days to express other opinions that might deviate a little from the mainstream and trigger certain individuals to be confronted with accusations of misanthropy. What's frightening about this is that certain people like Olivia Wilde seem to have developed a real hatred for existing men in general. Okay, with some exceptions. What is that sentence even supposed to mean? No one is saying that an incel community doesn't exist or that it couldn't be dangerous. Well, but let's hope for the future of our world that not every man is such an incel as is depicted in the movie. If you go back to the 90s, for example, there were movies like Thelma and Louise. The film is about how women in the early 90s are disadvantaged in certain areas, and through an impressive hero's journey, the movie shows the resistance of the two women. As a viewer, you can identify with them so well because they're depicted as tangible humans and not as practically flawless demigoddesses. Thelma and Louise is a female empowerment movie, but still, there were men in the movie who supported Thelma and Louise, who were good and fair and wanted to help the two women succeed. Similarly in The Silence of the Lambs, there were some scenes in which Clarice Starling was stared at by groups of men, so that even as a viewer you felt uncomfortable. But then came a cleverly feisty line from Clarice and the demonstration of her skills as an FBI agent, and every viewer immediately realizes this woman knows how to help herself. She's not a victim. Again, there are men who have serious mentor roles, one way or the other. Instead of telling nuanced, balanced stories, modern movie makers and showrunners often resort to a black and white kind of storytelling, which is often not only embarrassing, but also dangerous. Open-mindedness, inclusion and diversity in film and TV are undoubtedly important, but why is it, according to some, that this can only be achieved by showing extremes, running down certain groups of people, and depicting others as infallible in the process? Doesn't such an approach tend to drive our society even further apart? If only we could take the narrow-mindedness and the related to militant activism out of the description for wokeness, maybe then it could be achieved what certain people actually pretend to want to achieve. To unite our society, to bring us closer to each other, and to achieve a true tolerance for all. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, you could be interested in this video, in which we talk about how Disney tries to educate the world with certain political messages. Thanks for listening and see you next time.